Find your kitty cat?
No, my cat is still missing.
Oh, too
My
bad.
cat is missing. We had 2 flat tires today. My cat fell off my tooth. Like,
Yikes.
How was the animal shelter yesterday? There's a lot of cats there.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot of
There's a
cats.
lot of cats. I'm sorry, what did
Is
you
it an
say?
outside cat?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, she's kind of sort of. She has this space downstairs because she doesn't behave inside the house. So, but she stays very close to the house. She's got her little door. She's inside almost all the time.
Thinking about Mr. Coyote.
Yes, I was-
Slow around.
I reviewed all of our footage and we did not have any coyotes around. And now I'm like, oh my God, where did she go? She's a pretty street smart kitty
Well,
cat.
for what
So,
it's worth, our cat did the same thing yesterday. Must be cat escape day,
oh,
but turned back up. So
that's what,
Keep faith.
that's what Steve is saying. It was just, wait, maybe she'll, I'm like, oh, please.
I'd like to call to order the City of Port Aransas Capital Improvements Advisory Committee meeting number 1, May the 17th, 2022 at 3:17 p.m.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to the first meeting. We have programmed 3 meetings for the update of this finance tool. And so today is really going to be kind of an overview of impact fees, a little bit of technical, but then we want to have a little discussion on growth rates because we're going to develop our land use assumptions or a forecast of how we see things growing over 10 years. And so I'd like to get your input on what kind of growth rate we should consider for the analysis. So there's copies of the PowerPoint presentation there for you. My name's Eddie Haas with Reach and Nichols. I have been involved with the Impact Fee program here in Port A since its inception back in 2007. So I guess I might be the guilty guy of implementing this tool if I'm on the bad guy side of things. But yeah, so 2007 was when the program was initiated, updated in 2016, and here we are in the next mandated update. So I know we have 2 veterans. Mr. Chair, you're new to impact fees. Madam, are you new to impact fees?
Yes, I am.
And sir, are you new to impact fees?
Am I what?
New to impact fees? Were you on the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee last go around?
No.
Okay. So then the question for you 3 then is, what is an impact fee? Is it a finance tool? Is it a growth management tool? Is it a economic development sustainability tool? Is it a resiliency tool? I'm trying to think what other things it's been called. In your mind, any thoughts on what the impact fee is? The answer is it's strictly a finance tool. It is nothing else. So the image on the screen there is saying it's a finance mechanism to implement the plan. And when we say the plan, we're talking about the capital improvements plan for roads and for parks and soon for drainage. But those are rooted, those CIPs, the impact fee CIPs are rooted in your master plans, your master thoroughfare plan, which is getting ready to get updated as part of moving forward, part of the parks master plan, a stormwater drainage master plan is being prepared from there. It will be a CIP that's going to be brought into the impact fee program. So there'll be another tool there for addressing drainage issues and needs. So that's all it is. I mean, the other things that I rattled off are things that I've heard over the years. Oh, you're just steering growth away. Well, we'll just go somewhere else and develop. You know, the fact of the matter is you all are seeing growth. Growth will continue to happen. Impact fees we've seen in North Texas where it's very prevalent. It has not driven off growth. I mean, you think about not only your neck of the woods here in Port A, the state, we're at 25 million, going to go to 50 million here by 2046, 47 is what they say. Some crazy number like that. Water permitting, right? That's the number one thing. But growth will continue to happen, and it'll continue to happen in your community. You all are seeing it. We'll talk about growth rates here in a minute. So that's all it is. This is just a finance tool to help fund the capital improvements plan, the impact fee capital improvements plan. So it kind of gets to the crux of the matter, because infrastructure is very expensive stuff. You know, who's going to pay for this? And there's basically 2 sides of the coin. You've got the city that says, the community that's saying, hey, developers need to pay their fair share. Developers are saying, you city, you need to pay your fair share. And so who pays for growth? And so without an impact fee system, basically the pool of funds is your tax base. With impact fees, new development shares, keyword shares in the responsibility. And I say share because we're not charging the full amount. We're charging only up to 50% that's allowable. So we have to, you got to remind yourselves what, is it in development community thinks it's another way to stick it to the man, another fee. But, when we're talking about big investments in roads and in park facilities and soon the drainage facilities that'll be in there, it's big ticket items. Sure. Are impact fees the one solution? No. These projects are funded by other sources. It's just a small piece of the puzzle, if you will. Okay, so here's two images here. The one on the left is the road impact fee. This is from the 2016 image grab from the 2016 plan. We're going to talk about some of the things as part of that. In the lower right, that was the CIP for the parks plan. Those were the image or the listing, the graphical listing of the projects that were considered in the parks plan. Okay. So why are we updating? Well, state law, chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Codes says you have to, by law, update at least every 5 years. So we're at that 5-year mandate period where we're taking a look at this. And but we're also going to be adding a new component, and that's the drainage. And I failed to put that bullet up there, that we're going to be implementing a new component. So there's kind of a two-step public hearing process. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So as we work through this mandated update, there's a lot of technical that we're going to be talking about. And all this technical gets to the bottom line of what does it cost to put a unit of service on the ground? A unit of service on roads, unit of service of parks, soon to be square footage of drainage, impervious surface, to put a unit of infrastructure on the ground. And depending upon the type of development, the more traffic being generated or the greater area of impervious surface for drainage, the greater the impact, the greater the fee. Consuming more capacity, therefore, there's the higher impact fee.
How do you define a unit of service?
We will get there. You're already ahead of me, but we'll get there. There has to be a unit, there has to be this service unit that measures existing utilization, that measures how much capacity is being provided in the system, that measures how much demand would be generated by new development. So we'll talk about roads here, the vehicle mile, that's what it is. But we'll talk about that here in a second. Okay. So your role as the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee is to provide comment on three things: the land use assumptions, which we're going to be talking about the growth rates that fuels this 10-year picture, the capital improvement plans, and then ultimately the impact fee calculation. What's that cost per service unit? So those three things. And then you will also, your last final act will be to write a letter, send a letter to the city council that they will use as part of the public hearing, the consideration as part of the public hearing for the update. Required to have a public hearing through the city council. So we're going to meet, this is the first of 3 meetings. We'll meet in late September, where we're going to talk about the final land use assumptions, the preliminary CIP, and then in January of 23, that cost per service unit calculation, and all that will fuel the public hearing update, or the public hearing in March. That's the kind of the ones for the update. Technically in November, because we have to, for the drainage, that's the new piece, we have to have a separate public hearing that talks only the first 2 bullets, the May 17th, September 27th meeting, the LUA and CIP. We have to have a public hearing, getting those adopted before we can have the second public hearing. Otherwise, we just have one, but council's going to have to go through a 2-step process. Okay. Okay, so we're going to hit some of the basics here. And so this impact fee is a one-time charge to new development for the cost of a portion of public infrastructure to accommodate new development. Again, the higher the demand, or the more capacity is consumed, then the higher the impact fee. But the basic premise is that growth should pay for growth. That was kind of the indirect policy statement when this program was initiated back in 2007. As we're having more and more growth, occur to the community, that the new development should help pay their fair share. Now, all this technical leads to a very structured approach. So in the case of roads, there's a quantified finite amount of traffic that can be generated by fast food restaurants, by single family homes. There's all this list of land uses. And it provides this structured approach to what would the fee be, right? Versus prior to impact fees, there would be the negotiation process, development agreements. Oh, developer, you want to come in, you're going to donate half the right of way and you're going to build half the road. So there might be some inequity. If you think about it, if you have a large resort and they're asked to pay, contribute right away and pay or build half the road. And let's say you have a smaller single family residential paying their pro rata or their linear amount, there's an inequity there. That cost is the same, but the resort, they're generating more, but they're in essence paying less because that residential piece is paying more. So this levels all that out, takes all the horse trading out. Okay. And then it sets it straightforward about what the fees will be. So new development tends to like it because they can know in advance what the impact fees are going to be, right? And ironically, the legislation on impact fees, 1989, was initiated by the Home Builders Association. Too much horse trading going on, too many developer agreements, some guys getting not their fair shake, others getting a good deal, the inequity. And so they were the sponsors for that initial legislation back in 89. So, and so it's been in play. The legislation has been in place since 89. It's been challenged. It's been successfully defended. More and more communities are looking to impact fees, primarily because cities can't annex, developments getting parked right outside their city limits, and they're strapped on property tax. So how are they going to fund facilities? So a lot of cities that would never even think of impact fees, West Texas, Southeast over in Houston, you say the I word, you're going to get drug out of town. Midland has impact fees. Odessa, they've just implemented them. Lubbock's thinking about them. El Paso has them. League City, Galveston was contemplating. I don't know if they approved it, but it's happening across the state now, primarily in North Texas, down the I-35 corridor, but more and more communities are looking toward this finance tool, okay? And again, it's basically growth paying for growth. There's a very technically driven process that we have to follow to get to that bottom line. Then there's a very driven public process that we have to follow to get to the public hearings and through the public hearings. More importantly, while we're talking impact fees, the technical tool that is developed can also be used for assessing proportionality. Proportionality is a relatively new deal that's come out. Town in North Texas, Flower Mound, you may have heard of them. They had an impact fee program. Developer paid an impact fee. They put down a road that was technically off-site. They said, we want a credit. It wasn't in the impact fee program. Flower Mound said, no thanks. So the Stafford Estates sued, went all the way to Supreme Court. Flower Mound's lost, but the new legislation came in play that any exaction by a agency on development has to be proportional to the impact that they're putting on the system. So what does that really mean? Residential development, exacting right of way, you're exacting street, you're exacting water, wastewater, drainage. There has to be some accounting for that it's a proportional impact. So all the technical tools will be in the impact fee study if there's a challenge that's brought forward by development interests against the city on prove it. You're making me build this road, you prove it that it's warranted. So we've been assisting cities now on proportionality in those kinds of challenges. So anyway, but it's there. So you have that, but we're seeing more and more challenges that are occurring. So if you've got impact fees, you have the technical tools in place. If you don't have impact fees, these are cities that don't have them. They're developing processes that they can be able to measure this stuff. Okay. All right. How's the impact fee determined? Basically, it's the size of development. It's the area or the service area where they're located, the type of development. Each type of development has different traffic characteristics, right? Residential, resort.
I got an interview. They would not have an interview.
Sure.
So they don't.
Good luck. What? For your position? Or?
Maybe till 11.
Oh, I'm teasing her. I'm teasing. They'll be asleep when you come back. And I'm teasing. And then, so it's assessed at plating and it's collected at permit. Okay. So two-step developer comes in, brings the plat forward, plat gets approved through P&Z, through you all as P&Z. That's when the impact fee is assessed. It's collected when the builders pull the permit. That's when it's assessed, collected, okay? So that's why there's two schedules in the ordinance. Drain, water, wastewater, it's by the meter size, depending on the size meter needed to serve the development, that would be the impact fee. We don't have water and wastewater impact fees here, right?
Oh, we do.
But
Just
through the
not
county,
through the
not
city.
through the
Oh, through
city.
the county, okay.
Different
Yeah,
entity.
that other district, that's right. Okay.
That's the check you have to write before you.
That's right, before you.
You can't walk in the front door of the building permit without paying the impact fee.
But they're providing service,
Of course.
hopefully. If they weren't, that'd be a different story.
They're gonna tax us because it's such a good deal. Sure.
And then drainage, the new component that we're going to add to this thing, and I'm not a drainage specialist, but enough to be kind of dangerous in it. It'll be on the square footage of the impervious surface. So in other words, driveways that go to a residential development, that those driveways that are now impervious, that is, the fee is calculated based on that. So we have capital cost for drainage facilities, break that down into a cost per square foot basis, depending on the kind of land use. That's how the impact will be generally assessed. Okay. So what can they be paid for? It's basically anything, and these are capacity enhancing projects. You can't use impact fees for O&M, operations and maintenance, only new capacity adds. So it's basically the cost to put those appurtenances on the ground. Construction, engineering, right of way, if there's traffic signals associated with the project, if there's land right of way needs for roads, that's all part of getting the facility on the ground. So those kinds of costs can be included, including debt service. That can be included, and this impact fee update. So this is the cost to bring us here is coming out of the program. It's not coming to the city general fund. So the program is paying for itself. Okay. What can they not be paid for? As I kind of alluded to, it can't be paid for things like projects that are not on this impact fee CIP list. It's got to be on the list. In other words, new developments paying a fee, those fees are going to pay for those projects that are on that impact fee list. You can't use it for operations and maintenance. You can't use it to fix an existing condition or something that's going on with traffic. So it's very meticulous about those kinds of things. So, and then obviously administration doesn't cover those kinds of things. So it's strictly about getting projects on the ground. Is basically what it
It
is.
seems like kind of a gray area if you can't use it to upgrade existing. We have a stoplight that is out of date and we have more traffic here, so we need a better stoplight.
That's correct. So
Can it go to pay for the improved stoplight because of the added traffic, or?
in those kinds of arguments are what we get all the time, right? Well, wait a minute, we have a 2-lane gravel road that carries maybe 200 vehicles per hour during the peak hour versus a paved road. You have higher speeds, better geometry. There's more carrying capacity. That's got to be an increase. We see those gray areas, but the way you catch those things is the project is built, city comes back and recoups the cost of the excess capacity. So typically that cost of a signal would be associated with vehicle miles of capacity of the intersection. Then there's some existing utilization that's burning up some of that cost or eating at that cost. Only the leftovers considered in the program. We'll get to that here in a minute, but you're kind of ahead of the curve there on those kinds of things. But those are typically what are the kinds of projects that we're considering in the program. Okay. So by way of the update and as part of the new process, we're going to do number one, we've got to develop a forecast, land use assumptions. How are we going to grow? From how are we going to grow, it's going to inform the capital improvements projects that we need. Those are rooted in your Thoroughfare Plan. From there, we'll do the technical work, and then that's through your input and comment, those things, get the impact fee reports, and then we'll have the public hearing process, 2-step public hearing process that's woven through that. At the end of the day, there's an ordinance that's adopted by council that says, here's our Schedule 1, which is the maximum we could charge. Here's our Schedule 2, what we are going to charge. So those things get wrapped up into the ordinance. Okay. Policy-wise, council will be considering what rate to collect. You have been collecting at 50%. So if you all recommend something different, like i.e. lower than 50%, they'll take that under advisement under this process. But the council will be thinking about what rate to collect. How do we want to apply this? Currently have one cost per service unit for across the board. Some cities will say, hey, we want to have a certain collection rate for residential properties versus retail, commercial, maybe to incentivize one or the other, or maybe we want to have a higher collection rate for resorts versus local residential development. Nonetheless, so there's some things that some cities have done like that, or some other special exemptions to kind of incentivize. In other words, if you build in the core of the community, service area 1 and you provide, you do sidewalks and you get people out of cars, there's less traffic, or you bring employment to the city, there'll be a policy that will reduce the cost of the impact fees by X%. So there's all kinds of things that cities have gotten clever with on how they use it. But you got to remember, the cost of infrastructure is the cost of infrastructure. When the city incentivizes and does things and takes off, part of the impact fee, someone's going to pick up that burden and falls back on the tax base. Okay. All right. Oh, and there are some exemptions. So public housing is exempt by law. Low to moderate income housing is exempt. The school districts have the opportunity to pay the impact fee. They can participate. I think that's the word. They can participate in the impact fee, or they don't have to. So some communities that the school districts pay, others they opt out.
And we've exempted some projects from impact fees,
Yeah.
flexible developments through workforce housing.
Yes.
But that's a great example of a policy. Here's the cost to provide all the service. By policy, we want to exempt these things. We want to exempt maybe nonprofits or anything along the 361 corridor. So it'll be, the maximum amount or whatever. And so cities are using this to kind of incentivize certain kinds of activity going on in their community. Okay. So it's the impact fees imposed on all development plats that come through the P&Z. And then it is collected at building permit. So since we already had the program in process, someone's going to say, well, wait a minute. All right, I came through. If those developments that came through in the last go around, let's just say the cost per service unit goes up, where the fees potentially could go up. There's a 1-year grace period, whether it's a new program or an update. If they come in under the old one, they still have 1 year to pull that permit. If they don't pull that permit within 1 year, they are subject to the increase in fee. That becomes a policy decision, what the city wants to do. The city wants to play nice and say, no, we'll make it 2 years or whatever. That's a policy decision. But technically on new programs, like the case of drainage, it'll be brand new. Any development that comes in after the adoption of that impact fee, right there, they're subject to the fee immediately. Any development that was in the pipe, they are grandfathered for up to 1 year.
What considers it in the pipe?
So if there's been a preliminary approval by P&Z,
Preliminary approval of
Yeah.
a plat specifically?
yes, exactly. Yeah. But there could be other considerations built around that. Like some cities want to incentivize mom and pops or something they started the discussion as part of the development process. And I bring that up because that's a very real deal. Some of the development community, they get it, they understand it, they're coming from out of town. That's part of the deal. Mom and pops, they don't get it, and so some communities try to figure a way around that. So that they incentivize the local development. Okay. If there's any addition, for example, there's a retail center and they're going to add another 20,000 square feet. That addition is subject to the fee because it's adding an impact over and above what's out there. So when I said it's a one-time fee, yeah, it's a one-time fee, but if they add on, development, obviously it might generate some more activity. So that's subject to the fee. Okay. How do y'all handle that on net increases?
Additions?
Yeah.
I mean, we, calculate it the way we calculate
How do
everything.
you do residential out of curiosity? Like if
Residential,
you have a
uh,
residential, if there's like a granny flat.
an ADU, we have an ADU fee for
Okay.
the addition of an ADU. Now the expansion of a house, if you just increase your regular house by 25%, that's not in the increase.
Correct. Right. Yeah. Although there's studies to kind of show the bigger the house, there's more cars associated with that house. There's been some studies, but and that's kind of and I keep looking at you, Mr. Chair, maybe because you're part in the development interest. But if they see this equivalency table and here's the impact fee how it's calculated and you say, well, golly, we don't generate trips like that. The developer has the ability to submit data for the city engineer to consider. So there's some criteria wrapped around. You need to have at least 3 good sites, similar in nature. It's generally kind of situated similarly how it would be here in Port A, those kinds of things. But they have the ability to submit data.
But that only really makes sense for, like, if Cinnamon Shore did it all together as one big development, a
Yeah.
single builder on a single lot, that's not going to make sense for them.
Right,
And
right.
they pass along this cost.
And I've done trip generation studies for a long time now. And where you're looking at different sites. Yeah, in some of the mixed use, now all these mixed uses, that's different. But now some of the trip generation data is, we're starting to get some of the data for mixed use type developments, but anything can go in there. So it's really subject to test, but we're seeing like data that's within 15%. So, I did a real big one on medical office for the Kentucky Indiana MPO, and it came in within 15%. So it's like, these trip rates are still good. So, okay. But they have the ability to submit it. So here's that process again, submitted at final plat, or if it's in preliminary, whenever is the adoption, whenever it's for recordation. That's when it's assessed, it's collected at permit, and then the fees are used to implement projects. And so cities that have impact fee programs, they better be spending that money. And I think we are spending the money. So have you all been participated as the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee on the kind of the annual summary convening, just to say, okay, well, how much money have we collected? How are we using it? Might not be a bad idea, just to kind of, keep things transparent.
Still troubled why we're only collecting 50% of it.
We'll get to
That's
that
all
here.
you can.
We'll get to that here in a second.
Yeah.
There is a legitimate reason for that. All right, so schedule wise, we got a lot of things going on. That Christmas tree here. The items marked in blue are the advisory committee meetings. So we're there at the top. That's where we're meeting to discuss the impact fee 101, as well as some of the growth rate information for land use assumptions. Next go around, we'll talk the final land use assumptions calculation, the associated preliminary CIPs. There's some activities in white that fall on us as the consultant team, in green that fall on staff for noticing. The red are council activities. So at the bottom there's a public hearing that's showing up. That's because the drainage piece is a new one, but we're going to use the LUA for all three components. But there's a resolution that needs to call for the public hearing, and then there's the actual public hearing. Then there's another resolution adopting an ordinance. So that's step one. As we kind of continue forward, you see in blue there, the final meeting is January 31st. That's where we'll have the final cost per associated calculation. You might have the question about, well, what are other cities that have impact fees? What are they collecting? Like Portland, they've got them now. So we'll have some graphs on what they're collecting. Corpus Christi is under study right now. They're doing impact fee study right now. And then your final action there in the last blue bar there is that letter. March 6th is the kind of the day. So hopefully we'll get it before then. Nicole and Rick are all happy that it's all done, but by law, that letter has to be into the city secretary at least 5 business days advance of that public hearing. So that's kind of like a few days extra, but we'll have a draft letter for you as we go through the process. We'll draft a letter. Then that'll be a starting point. Then you all can change to however you like, so that it's your letter. So, and then the targeted completion March 16th is when the new ordinance would go into play as part of that public hearing. So for roads and parks, it's an update. So for drainage, it's the potential imposition of an impact fee, because this is new. So the council will have to decide, should we do this for drainage? So you all may want to weigh in on that. Yeah, we think you should. So and we'll coach you on that in our last meeting. But that'll be what the advisory committee is going to want to hear, or the council is going to want to hear as part of the March 16th public hearing. Okay. All right. Some of the technical elements, service areas. So we have 3 service areas that's shown on the map there. And we were kind of talking about it before everyone else arrived. These were set up initially back in 2007. We don't like to change them because monies have been collected by these service boundaries. And so you're going to say, wow, they look kind of odd. Well, in 2007, when we set it up, we wanted to get the bulk of the community in one service area, kind of what we call it, the city center, but the core of the community.
Old Town and
yeah.
down the highway as far as we were allowed to go.
Right. And by law, service areas can only be no greater than 6 miles. Well, why 6 miles? Well, it was 3 miles.
6 square miles or
It says 6 miles. So we put up, we do.
It's very vague.
6 linear miles?
That's right. So we do a 6 mile bubble, a 3 mile radius. So we capture the land within it. So, but it's by law so that bigger communities aren't collecting monies in one side of the town and spending them all on projects on the other.
Okay.
So money's collected in service area 2, which in 2007 was the final frontier. All that was, it hadn't even started really in 2007, but access road 1B in South was kind of like the last deal. And so there was the limit, but we felt that, that needed to be its own service area anyway. Then we have another one on the other side of the intercoastal. Your city limits actually goes across there. Nothing in there right now. Yes. We have some ideas on the seat for the comprehensive plan about that, but that's a different meeting. So we have 3 service areas. So we'll keep the same service boundaries for the system there. Okay. All right, the land use assumptions, I'm going to pass this slide because we're going to come back to it when we talk about land use assumptions. The CIP, as I alluded to earlier, it's rooted in your thoroughfare plan. So anything that's classified as an arterial or collector class facility on your thoroughfare plan can be incorporated into the program. So we've done that. We've included projects 361, it was 11th Street, a couple of other projects in there. Don't recall the specific ones, but when we can also include projects on the state system. Well, wait a minute, you're not paying for it. Well, as long as the city's actually contributing some dollars to it, whether it's right of way, the cost of right of way, or utility relocates, that's why we had 361. They were contributing some percentage of that project back in the day. We'll true that up as part of this analysis when we get through into the technical work. Okay. And so that impact fee CIP is different from your regular CIP. Again, only monies collected from impact fees can be used to pay for those projects on that list. Not on that list, can't use it. So we've had that happen. Well, this project's on the thoroughfare plan and it's on the impact fee CIP. Technically, too bad, so sad. But cities are about fairness, and so they'll typically go through an updated process, get that on the thoroughfare plan so the developer can get his credit. He pays money for a road, he should get a credit. And I agree, it's all about fairness. So, but it has to be on the impact fee CIP. Okay. This is the thoroughfare plan. It will be amended as part of moving forward, but it called out really basically anything there in red, blue, or the thinner red are eligible. So your Avenue Gs, your cutoff, your 361s, station, all those kind of facility streets are eligible. Your 1A, 1B access roads. So we've got them all in there. So if we amend the thoroughfare plan and add other collector class facilities or an arterial, we probably won't be adding an arterial street. But if we add some collector facilities, then we can add that into the program. Okay. So here we get back to your service unit question. So why the service unit? So there has to be the ability to measure how much traffic is occurring out on the street. There has to be the ability to measure how much capacity is being provided by these roads. And there has to be the ability to measure how much impact the new development makes. Okay. So we use a vehicle mile. So if someone says, well, what's the carrying capacity of Avenue C? Well, in the peak hour, it's probably for Avenue C, which is probably a collector class street, it's probably about 450 to 500 vehicles per lane in the peak hour. Well, wait a minute, if it's 450 there and it's 450 further down, how do you quantify that? Well, that's where the mile comes in. So you can say, if it has a carrying capacity of 450 times a segment of road of distance, you're able to quantify how much finite capacity is out there. You have that same segment of road, you put a tube counter on there, how much traffic is passing that tube. You can say vehicles in a segment of road, we can quantify how much capacity or utilization's out there. So we're able to do that. And then if we have a development, 500, and this is where the service unit equivalency table comes in, but if we have 500 dwelling units as part of a condo resort, we can measure the specific impact because we have a table that has trip characteristics and trip length characteristics, vehicle mile, associated on a unit basis for any kind of land use. Not any, but for the most part, a significant number. Okay. So that's why we use the vehicle mile. It's been in place since we adopted the program. So why the vehicle mile? But we use the vehicle mile in the PM peak hour because most roads are sized to address a peak hour condition. Okay, that's what most roads are designed for. Typically the PM peak, but more importantly, most land uses are peaking during that time. So we use that peaking characteristic as part of the overall program. Okay, someone might say, well, golly, daycares, they generate different than, or schools generate different from retail. Well, you know what? Now there's a lot more activities going on at school. There's a certain amount of trip activity that occurs during that rush hour, the peak hour, that they're paying their fair share. So yeah, those that peak outside of the peak hour, maybe they're getting a free ride a little bit, but it's not much at the end of the day.
How do we get a copy of the table?
Man,
I'm
you
sure
are
it's on the
just
form of
all
the warrant.
over this. I have an image of it, but it's in the formal report from last go around. We'll be amending it. We'll talk about that here in 2 minutes, I promise.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're all over it. So I keep talking about this cost per service unit, how you calculate this stuff. Okay. So when we calculate the cost per service unit, here's the legal definition. It's the cost of necessitated or the cost attributable to growth over the service units of growth over a 10-year window. So in other words, we have these road projects. It has vehicle miles of capacity. So but the two little bars there on the screen there, hopefully this helps to explain it. So if we have a certain number of roads on the program, we sum up how much capacity is provided by those roads, that the new capacity or excess capacity, and there's a cost associated with that, right? So we have new capacity, we have the cost to provide the capacity. And then we use the land use assumptions, the 10-year forecast that's expressed in terms of vehicle miles. Yes, future population will be X number of persons that we convert to vehicle miles. We can say, okay, if we need 60% of that CIP, that's all we're going to consider the cost per service unit calculation. So there's no foul play going on, but we're able to do the straight calculation because we're dealing with service units or vehicle miles of growth over the 10-year window. Does that make sense? So if someone says, golly, that impact fee is too high or too low, let's add more projects. We're summing them up by service area. We're using generalized costs unless there's some exorbitant cost in a project like a bridge or something that jacks the cost way up. Only that will have an effect on it. But otherwise, there shouldn't be that big of an effect on that calculation. There would be if there wasn't enough capacity. So service area 2 was lower. So we have growth in service area 2 that's using all that capacity and stretching that cost out. That's why that cost per service unit is going down. So either we find another project, we put another project on the Thoroughfare Plan if we need it. Otherwise, it'll probably continue to go down.
Until it goes, and then if there's not a project there, it would be.
And if there's no project, 0, right? Like in service area 3, okay?
So where does service area 2 start?
1B.
Right where one B,
South of Cinnamon Shore North.
just south of Cinnamon Shore North. So they drew it that way to have that 1B in there so that everybody would have a
I
project.
remember that.
So I think if memory serves, since you remember that, do we have 100% service area 2 or do we split it?
It's 100%.
We put it all into, okay. Typically, some cities,
I'm pretty sure.
they'll split it.
Sure it's 100%.
I'll check it, but yeah, half could be in service area 1, the other half could be in 2.
Because there's some other developments, not just the new one that's down there. So I think that it's 100%.
Now, where's Bayside? Is that split between Cinnamon Shore? I mean,
Bayside
between
what?
Service 1, Cinnamon Shore, Bayside.
That's going to be all service area 2,
That's all true.
which is why their service area, why their fee is so low.
Okay.
Because they got a lot of people sharing the cost of that road.
So how long can we continue to collect impact fees? As long as there's excess capacity in that CIP. So we'll have 2 counts. I think first or second week in June, we're going to have some counters out there. Why after school's out? Well, there's more demand going on. So we want to make sure we capture that. Want to make sure we capture. But once that capacity is consumed and it's gone, we got to take the project out. So if 1B is running over capacity, comes out, 0 collection rate service area 2. So we'll see.
They still don't want the road.
Yeah. But that's, we're trying to be transparent about it. We're not fabricating. And so we got to be, true up on that. So here's that equivalency table. It's very hard to read, but in the real report, it's a full 8.5 by 11. By design, I did it like this so that you could look.
Mine was even bigger. You can't see.
No fancy.
Yeah, it is. And I can send you a copy of the report.
We've got that.
But there's in the equivalency table, there's 5 general land use categories: residential, office, commercial, industrial, and institutional. And within those, there's subcategories. Like in the commercial, there's fast food, grocery stores, all the list of like kind of commercial type activities. But more importantly, for each one of these land uses, there's trip generation data, vehicles, and there's trip length information, miles. So we have and when you multiply the 2 together, you have a service unit equivalent, a vehicle mile equivalent on a independent variable. So in other words, for residential is on a per dwelling unit basis. Typically, the commercial is on a per 1,000 square foot basis, but like, gas stations, we might have by fueling position, hospitals by number of beds, but it's a rate tied to those kinds of, or that independent variable unit of development. So that way, when we get a development application, we can, based on the size, we can use that service unit generation to quantify an impact fee.
I just want to see the big map that goes into it. That's why I asked.
Yes, and there is some math. So like, for example, the data, the trip generation data comes from ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers. They're now on edition 11. When we did 2016, I think it was 9th edition. Now we're on 11th edition. And so here's where we kind of true up the how much traffic is being generated by different land uses, right? Right. You think about it now, more people are, in the case of commercial, you're, doing service deliveries, your Amazons and all that. We're seeing trip generation rates dropping. And for certain land uses, industrial distribution, we're seeing those go up. And so it corresponds with what's going on. Is there data about what happened, the effects of COVID? No, not yet. But we can, yeah, it's right, because we're back at about 95%. We have streetlight data, which is your PDA, your phone. So Big Brother, we're able to capture data and we use that data. But we use ITE for the trip generation rate. And then we have trip length. In other words, think about your home to work, which might be the beach. If work is your beach, that's great. But if you're traveling from home to work, you're impacting a series of streets, you have a associated mileage that you're traveling to work. So we have, and there's data available from the census, there's data available from the MPO, different work types. Home to work has a longer trip rate than say home to office. I mean, home to commercial or retail. That's your home non-work. Or there's the home non-work to non-home. There's 3 trip types. But anyway, we tailor trip lengths to land uses. So we have a true tailored table to Port A on trip activity. Okay. Still, there's some subjectivity in there. So that's why if a developer thinks those rates aren't appropriate, they can provide data and the city engineer can consider it. Okay. So we have this tailored equivalency table. And Nicole, do you have the PDF of the report that we could get to the chair?
Yeah, better than that, I can give you what we actually use to calculate stuff, and I think it will make more sense.
Then you can see all the data in its glory. And there's other things we do to that data, right? So in the case of trip generation rates, there's data on pass by and diverted trips. So think about a shopping center. Think about, they're not capturing trips that are strictly primary trips to and from. They're traffic that's already out there. Oh, I got to go by the grocery store to get stuff. We net out any data that's available, pass by and diverted, leaving only the primary trip. So we're scaling back what's in that trip generation table to be associated with the primary trip itself. So we've made some adjustments on that so that new development is not getting double dipped. Okay, if you're at home and you're going to work, or your work going to home, there's a trip rate associated with that. But if you go by a grocery store, that's a pass-by trip. If there's data available, that we reduce the trip rate of grocery store because that traffic is already out there. And it makes sense, right? Why should they pay for traffic that's already out there? Similarly, we make adjustments to the trip length. We cut it in half because home to work, your trip to work is a round trip. You go to work, you come back. We cut it in half, so only 1/2 of that trip's associated in the impact fee. So that way the developer's not getting double dipped. Okay, so we cut that trip length in half. All of this.
How would the developer be getting double dipped?
Well, if we were to charge a full round trip, well, the office is paying, they're paying the other side of that trip. Yeah. And so it's not fair to pay both pieces. Okay. All right. So you will get that report. And
That explains why it's at 50%.
Nope.
No.
And let's, you know what, let me go back to that. This is an important piece here. All right. So the cost per service unit, where does this 50% come from? So in 2011, it's hard to believe 11 years ago, but in 2011, development went down to the legislature and said, wait a minute, we're paying impact fees, or we're putting roads on the ground, raising the ad valorem value of the property that the city's getting the benefit of, and we get no credit out of that. BS on that. So the law was changed that said, if a city wants to charge the absolute maximum, they have to figure out what that credit is. We call the finance analysis or credit analysis. And you look at the indebtedness on bonds and the property valuation and impacting. Our finance guys do that black box math. In the alternative, you just credit the cost of the CIP by 50%. So that credit analysis we've seen will get to cities that can charge anywhere from 70 to 90% That's if they want to charge that absolute max. In the alternative, they only charge 50% because we're crediting the cost of CIP by 50%. So that's where that 50% comes from. So the city has said in the past, we don't think we want to charge more than 50%. They've capped it at that, didn't do the finance analysis. We weren't brought on to do the finance analysis this go around because there's maybe no appetite for it. I don't know. Maybe there is. I don't know. But for right now, we're not going to do it. So that means the maximum you could collect will be that at that 50% rate.
We as Port A would lose if we tried to go back the other direction.
$100,000
lot and turn it into $1.5 million property. If we tried to take it all the way and credit it back.
Maybe, maybe,
I think we-
right, because
I don't know.
it goes into the indebtedness of the bonds and all that. And so maybe we should do this. No, but it would be based, then your political will as a community. Do we want new development to pay the maximum amount possible? Maybe, maybe not. On the other hand, developer puts down improvement, he gets credited back at that rate. You put down a road, you're getting, and you're paying an impact fee at 50%, you're going to get credited at 50% rate, not dollar to dollar. Otherwise, the program goes upside down.
Is that true in PUDs? Every road we build,
So there's-
developer build or private?
Yeah, those are all private, so that's.
Yeah,
We
we-
haven't done a public road in 30 years.
Where's the
The city hasn't built the public. road.
Palmia Cinema Shores.
Well, in the-
Oh, those.
Developers don't build.
We don't build public streets.
We have one.
City does.
Well,
Avenue-
and so
Avenue
you know what? And that's very true, because quite honestly, developers do it quicker, better, cheaper.
But my point is, they're not even defined as city roads. They're private.
Oh. But the
We're not-
city,
There's not a new city road in this town in 30 years.
so Avenue
Granted, there'll be
G,
an
Avenue
extension of
G,
One street or whatever.
Avenue G is not a public street?
No, we've got lots of public streets. He's saying new streets.
No,
go
Oh,
here.
the new stuff.
all
I
the
got you.
development is all private.
Gotcha.
By city's design. They don't want to take care of it. Rather development.
So I guess,
But does that not integrate into this kind of matrix algorithm or whatever we're talking?
well, but if those roads were in the CIP, but they're not.
Are
right.
they not?
They're not.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I'm not debating it. I was just
Sure,
getting clarity on it.
yeah.
because
Those roads aren't in
We're
our
just not
thoroughfare
in
plan.
road, city's not a road business.
True. And there's another argument to be said about that for PUDs and MUDs and all that. I mean, those improvements are based on the increase in valuation that pays for themselves. Should that be included in the impact fee program? Well, if the
That was
city's
my
going to be
next-
expending some dollars to help get that road on the ground, then that portion of dollars would be eligible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess it could flip the other way if
If we could-
if the valuations
I
went
could
down.
Debate either side of it and be very, very confident.
What's that?
I could debate either side and I feel really good about my
Yeah.
debate.
Well, and
But I
and
think that means that this is really healthy stuff y'all done. I mean, the state's done a good job.
well, I mean, and it gets all back to the fairness question.
Right.
Why should development pay more than their fair share? And all cities want to do is put the thoroughfare plan or put the master drainage plan on the ground. Because that plan is rooted in your future land use and takes into consideration your ultimate build out. So they should only pay their fair share. That's why it's strictly a finance tool. No growth management, all that stuff. Okay. All right, so two-step process of how you calculate fees. So let's just say here, development located in Port Aransas in Service Area 1, let's just say the collection rate was 859. This is the old one, right? This was 2016, so
This was,
let's just
no,
say-
this I think was even before.
the 07, okay,
Maybe, I don't know. I can't remember if it was 18, I thought it was 1800.
I can't remember.
I feel like it was
Sounds familiar.
1800 and.
All right, so we're gonna have to pretend. So let's just say the
This is not
cost,
real numbers.
yeah, let's just say the collection rate is 859 per vehicle mile. So how do you calculate the fee? You go one dwelling unit, you look up the service unit generation from that equivalency table, generates 1.49 vehicle miles of traffic, which has a demand of 1.49 vehicle miles times the cost per service unit, 859 equals your impact fee, $1,279. Okay. Typically, non-residential is on a per 1,000 square foot basis. So if you have 25,000 square feet of office, 25,000 divided by 1,000 times the service unit generation gives the demand of 59.5 times the collection rate, 859 per vehicle mile. Your impact fee is $51,110. That was the longhand method. I think we did the cost calculator. So now you do pull down
So-
menus and it does all the work for you. So
Which is why none of you have returned.
yeah, maybe. But so here's kind of like some acid test. Someone's going to say, you mean to tell me a 25,000 square foot retail center is going to pay an impact fee of $26,000? That's serious money. These 100,000 square foot industrial distribution facilities paying $400,000 of impact fees? Yes,
That's not
because
it.
that's the cost that they're putting on this system of roads, right? That's the cost that's happening. That burden is being,
Is that high? Oh, wow.
yeah, some are very high. And so if developers say, well, golly, I could build that road cheaper than my impact fee, get that developer agreement out and sign it and pull that road off. Let them build it.
Is that
Yeah.
25,000 square feet impervious cover, 25,000?
No, that's
additional space?
of space. Yeah, this is
Space
roads.
based on
This is
roof.
roads, strictly roads example, yeah.
Yeah, we use square footage of buildings, so AC space.
AC space.
Okay. All right, impact fee ordinance, Schedule 1, Schedule 2, all the details of, collections or any discounts or anything. All right, so we have a parks fee that we're looking at that is part of the update. We call it a parks fee. We don't call it a parks impact fee because the law is specific that impact fees are used for roads, water, wastewater, and drainage. Doesn't say anything about parks. So any city can adopt any fee. We've adopted the methodology of the impact fee to say, okay, we have capital facilities that in this parks plan, what's the cost of that? And we've said, okay, we're going to divide that cost out by ultimate number of residential units in Port A. Total number of dwelling units in Port A gives a cost per dwelling unit. Those that are already built, that gets out. The remainder is what's being considered. That's how we derive the park fee. We may separate this out only because if there's someone that's going to be pining, well, you're calling it a park impact fee. It's not, you can't have park impact fees. We may have two different documents. I'm going to be working with I was talking with David about this. We may break that out. So, and if we do that, you guys won't comment on parks because it's a city study. We'll have you do that for transparency purposes though. Okay. So just a little nomenclature thing there. So here's the parks, the update is we're just allocating the portion of cost to new development. We're taking it on a per dwelling unit basis. And we could examine this. Right now we've focused the fee based on the number of residential units. So in other words, anything non-residential, they're not really paying. We're just saying the total number of residential units, people that live here, that cost gets allocated out. So new units that come in, they're paying that portion of what that fee is.
Or dwelling units, even if they don't live in them.
That's right. So,
And it doesn't consider service area?
so you guys are good. In the lower left, we said the park service area is the full city limits because we've got facilities all across the city. And so that's our plan. I think it had skateboard parks and it had trails and it had there is the parks plan that's being updated. So we're going to be using their data, the new data, if they're adjusting a trail plan or whatever, new amenities, likewise, amenities that have been built, the actual costs in there. So anyway, so we'll be doing that for the calculation. This is just a picture of that same process that I just spoke about. Get the total cost of the parks program, the total number of dwelling units within the city at build out, cost divided by dwelling units, net out the existing use, the future number left to be built is what is considered as part of the parks fee. Okay.
Still the same caveats with new projects?
Yes, but yeah, but we're just kind of taking the methodology from impact fees and said, hey, look, this is just fairness. Any kind of new capacity thing, new parks things, we're not asking that development pay for O&M. That's not fair. Just get the stuff on the ground.
But are there the same laws that dictate that?
So I'm sorry, the question
Like
is
state law says that you can only use these impact fees for projects that are
for
already
capacity
part of your-
enhancement projects
Are there laws that,
on the park side.
yeah,
Indirectly, but that's like parkland dedication ordinances and things like that, which allude to the same kind of thing. We're just saying, hey man, we don't want to hit development with anything more than just the cost of these facilities.
Sure.
Okay. So the same kind of process will be undertaken here for the parks update. All right. That was the 101. All right. LUA. Now I promise you got to get out of here by 5:15, right? Okay, we got plenty of time. So we're going to talk about the land use assumptions. Okay, this is just the building block for us to develop a plan. So we want to look at how we think the city is going to grow over the next 10 years. So we're going to develop this forecast for the years 2022 to 2032, right? So how we think we're going to grow, because there'll be new residential units, and we look at two things. We look at population and we look at employment. And so you think about it, right? Population has traffic demand, associated with all the apartments, condos, and residential units. Employment generates differently, right? Your commercial, your office. So we look at employment to kind of help with our forecast of how much growth will be generated over the 10-year window. So we see population growth occurring, right? We're going to grow by X number of persons over 10 years. We use that equivalency table for residential. We can convert back to vehicle miles of demand. We look at 3 categorical areas of employment: industrial, office, and commercial, to kind of get a handle on the non-residential side. Well, someone could say, well, golly, you need to be considering restaurants and this and that. I mean, we're trying to keep this high level for this calculation. We could drill down, but then do we know exactly what's going to happen in 10 years? No, it's what we think is going to happen. So that's why they're called land use assumptions. Your idea of land use might be better than mine. We're going to be looking at historic trend. So that's why we want you guys to weigh in on this, okay? So this population growth is the census data since 1970. And what it does is it tracks how we've been growing. Where were we? We were roughly at 1,200 population in 1970. In 2020, the census that came out, we're at 4,203. We've provided a guesstimate of what we think 2022 is. We looked at your permit activity, and I could probably corroborate this with Nicole, with you, but of the permits, how much has actually been built? We guesstimated 25%. We could be wrong, but we guesstimated about a quarter of it.
You're saying of the permits that have been
The next one's wrong, then 45% owner occupied it includes.
So, and
It's much lower.
it's much lower.
Much.
Okay, then that means that 4,303 might be more like, I don't know, 4,275 or something like that. So yeah, weigh in on that if you want. I would like to hear that. That's important to know.
It's dramatic. I got the reason I bring it up. I love data. It's my favorite thing. But we're here looking at population growth, but that's not 2% of what's happening in the town.
We'll get to the next graph. Hold on. Just hold on. Man, you guys are good. So, I mean, but look at the bottom of the chart there, the compound annual growth rate. So over the last 10 years, you've grown at 1.91% per year, just based on population. That's your, so, okay. And then we looked at 3-year, 5-year, 7-year. So 1.83, 2.19, 2.28. So about 2% is your base population. I know what you're thinking. There's a lot more people in this town than just 2%. And you might be right. And you're going to be very right. Right. And so
6 million visitors and 3,000 permanent residents. That's it.
So that gets us to our next graph, the permit data. So I didn't have too many bullets in there because I had a dash in XX, because your line is all of a sudden taking off, but that's because you've got a lot of encumbered properties, I guess, particularly on the south side of town, but maybe some of this is infill. I don't know.
Some of it is, but most of it's.
Yeah, you had, let's see, in 2021, you had 274 permits.
Yeah, this year, I pulled the numbers today actually, and this year so far we've got 139.
So okay. Oh, really? Okay. For 2022, 139?
Yeah, year to date.
Okay. Well, we don't know how it's going to finish out, right? So that's why I said I will only go to 2021. But your permit activity is just kind of spiking, and it's continuing to grow. And so what that does is, let's go to this next chart here. So, or this table. So what I kind of alluded to on the top half, that's the population growth, compounding growth rate, the 1.9, 1.8, 2.1. You're growing at your base population at about 2.19. And your permit data suggests you're growing a lot faster than that. 28% compound annual growth rate in the last 3 years, 19% in 5 years, 12% over 7 years, 9.2% over 10 years. So the question is, what growth rate should we assume? We're kind of low on
Why do you- what's the
population.
kind of Growth rate,
Yeah, you're, hold
Well,
on.
it's for
And then you're at your permit, you're kind of high.
right?
So we want to kind of figure out something kind of in between. Because we don't know what really is going to be the growth rate. Sure, we're having a lot of permits and it suggests that the city is going to grow a lot faster, but we're not certain, right? We're thinking about 10 years. We could be in a boom right now. It could level off. Inflation, we don't know what else is going to happen there. Over 5 years, I don't know what's going to happen. But by law, we're going to be looking at this thing probably in year 4.5, close to 5 years again. So we have to look at it again. So the question for you all is, what growth rate should we assume? Now, before you get there, oh, hold on. I got to go back to this one. Oh, shoot.
I think you gotta go over there.
Remember the cost per service unit? And so like if we only needed 60% of that CIP, that's all we're considering. If we were to go with a very high growth rate, our demand could outstrip our capacity that's made available in the CIP, driving that cost per service unit down, kind of like what we talked about in service area 2. So we have to kind of wait a minute here. Not that the impact fee is a solve all, right? It's just a finance tool to get some monies to help get these projects on the ground. But if we use that high growth rate, that cost per service unit is going to go way down, coupled with the reduction in trip traffic on the equivalency table. Your collections to what you have been experiencing will probably go down. So I think, and this is just Eddie thinking, but I want y'all's thoughts on this. I think we ought to consider something in between 2% and that 20 some odd percent. Okay, let me go.
I think it'd also be helpful to look at the whole state of Texas.
Yeah, 25 to 50.
We're the hangover to the growth in Texas. I mean, it's growing everywhere. We're getting out of it. So I think you have to look at, as we're
It's kind of tricky.
a vacation community, that people who are coming to Texas or Texas growing is coming in here. I think you want to take that into account. I understand what he's saying. You don't want to get those numbers too high, or then our impact fees could go down.
We don't want that.
We don't want that. Nope.
And we're not trying to finesse the program to make development pay. We're just trying to be logical here, because we got two different trends. Level, generally a low growing one, and one that's spiking up. And what makes the most sense? I said 9%, but it could be 10.
I don't know if development cares. Impact fees high.
Yeah, I agree
I don't
with
think
that.
they care. They pass it on to the consumer. We're in a
Yeah.
high demand situation today.
Totally agree. There's no lack of development, and
Sure.
So what would be the benefit with going with a higher growth rate than a lower growth rate?
But we're on a unit cost basis, so it doesn't matter. As long as we have enough capacity to cover, we should be fine. And
got the projects.
we have the projects. We may be adding to the CIP based on the new thoroughfare plan that we're working up on the comp plan side of things. But I don't think we should look at 20% compound annual growth rate. But I don't think it's out of the realm to say, okay, since the 10-year compound average based on permits is 9%, 9.2, it's just, I think 9% is probably fine, somewhere in a tweener. We could make it 10, but here's the next, let's think about this thing one step further. So in the past, the build out of Port A was about 9,000. Based on your future land use plan, where was it? Here we go. The ultimate build out was 9,080. I don't know if that's going to change as part of the visioning of our community and changes in land use. But if we said build out population is 9,000 at a 9% growth rate, which is the column highlighted in blue, we're going to be built out by 2032. We'll have 10,900 people here. So that's why we're kind of that's why you have to kind of weigh this thing here.
I don't see that.
I mean, I feel like,
I can see it, but you add 10 to that, and I can see.
Yeah.
I feel like even in 2016, we said that the growth rate that you used then was probably too high.
Well, I
If I
think we, you
remember.
know what, we used like 3, we went the base population route.
But
But it makes sense that it makes sense that we have we have short-term rentals. They're owned by somebody. There's still an impact because it's being used. So we ought to kind of consider the building permit stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking somewhere in between. You're already reacting negatively to, man, we're going to be built out by 2030. You don't think so? Maybe it suggests 7% or 6% or 5% growth rate. At 5% growth rate, build out is roughly 2038, 2039. It's at 7% build out might be somewhere around 2035, 2036.
25 years won't be a place to tear it.
So you're saying 2050?
Yeah.
Wow, so then that means you're suggesting the low side.
I just don't think it's gonna take that long.
She doesn't think it's gonna take that long. I think
You say 25 years.
25 years.
Tim,
I think it's low
15?
over.
Do you think it'll level out?
I
So
think it is going to over the next 10 years. I think it
it-
will.
I think you're right.
I think
We
it's-
might have a spike now.
Mhm.
And then I think it's going to level out for a little bit.
Yeah.
And depending on the vision of the community, where we're going to go with vision.
And hurricanes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one.
I mean,
right. Yeah,
I
of
think-
of what will be. So I'm not opposed to 9%. Only because we're kind of thinking, well, yeah, we've got all this stuff going on, the dwelling units, but does it make sense that we're 10,000 people in 2032?
It's not
I mean,
10,000 people.
Yeah,
10,000.
But it's not 10,000 people,
understand.
but it's all that stuff that comes with the short-term rentals, which is more like, I hear the numbers are like 60,000 people.
On the data that you have available, it's not a debate, it's a question, but it's my belief that more than half of the 6 million people that come here every year are day trippers. So I'm curious if that type of data is available and if it's integrated in to this cost per unit. 'Cause
Honestly,
that's a whole different.
you're right. Honestly, just looking at the growth rate, we have not. Bless you.
We're just a crazy, unique little town when 6 million people come to visit.
You're exactly right.
4,000 people living.
You're exactly right. And it's
There's a tremendous.
it's a
amount of
unique,
impact.
it's a unique situation.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And
Not
so
much data and study on it.
so we're supposed to get data from the Chamber of Commerce, but that would be seasonal. I don't know if they have
Textile
data
would be
on,
good, too.
if they have data
don't know
on
if they have
the
day
amount of
trippers.
day trippers.
I don't even know
I
how
believe they
you,
do.
how
I
you.
believe they-
found that out.
Was that from the survey that was done, that one last year or 2 years ago?
No, I believe they've just been collecting it recently. I don't know what their mechanism was.
He did say that TechShot has collection points now.
In
Regular.
perpetuity all the time.
Yeah. That we
So
might be able
we're
to.
talking growth rates. Population growth, compound annual is about 2%. Based on permits, it's about 9%. Over 10, it's a 10-year growth rate. It could be as, last couple of years, you've been it's through the ceiling. You've been 28%, 19% at 5
on
years.
permit
12%.
growth rates.
Yeah, permanent growth rate. We're discussing what is an appropriate growth rate for Port Aransas, because we get down to the kind of the skinny, depending on what that growth rate is, 9% means you'll have about 10,900 people here by 2032, which is build out. Does that make sense?
I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
It's gotta be
but I
way
think
le- it's gotta be
even
way
at
less
full
than
build
that.
out, we're not gonna have.
The population has hardly any correlation.
I agree. I agree. Because you're
It's
impacted
so
by the,
unique. This little town's so unique.
Yeah. but we do know that
We're still a basis.
that's right. I mean, we know how many units are coming. We know what, like, I think it's 45% are owner occupied, 55%
No,
are,
that's not correct.
Short term, or it's flipped?
Where that came from, but
oh, that's this,
where did that come
that data is, where the short-term rentals that Erica got. That was from,
And we gave her the data on the short-term rentals,
Yeah,
but that wasn't,
that's
it's not
data.
complete.
No,
It's
but
not
like-
complete
I
data.
know it was the
okay.
45% just is just a bad assumption.
you think that it should be a lot lower, huh?
There's probably about, from the data that we provided to
Sorry.
her, there's probably about 700 short-term
Yeah.
rentals not listed on there.
Okay, but
Right.
that's not-
At
That's
least.
not what this 45, estimated based on the housing permit data.
It's completions. We said 25% of new data or of 2021 is complete. And then we said of that, we said based on the number of short-term to total from the census, which is 45% is owner occupied by just census data and in the permits.
Okay, I mean, I know that I built about 450 homes and I've, over the last 20 years, and I invite permanent residents, but I'm at about 1%. 2%.
of growth, annual growth?
I still build a lot of houses, but
Owner occupied.
these
Owner
are
occupied.
owner occupied.
Oh, gotcha.
No,
Okay.
it's
Oh.
just, that's just a distorted,
In new development, we think it's
it's like
a very low,
99
a
out of
low
100.
percentage of
Yeah.
owner occupied.
Yeah, it is low.
Okay, but we still need to weigh
Yeah,
the
basis.
fact that we'll have short-term rentals, properties that are going to continue to develop. Some will be owner occupied and maybe the number's really low, but some will be, short-term rentals. It's still impacting.
So they were using some census data for the 45%.
Yeah, that was so we
And
have
that
the
was
total
just
number of dwelling
nuts.
units in Port A. It was like roughly 4,000, roughly.
Mhm.
But the rental register doesn't have, that's incomplete, and that'll never be right, because there's a zillion people that have houses down there that don't rent them, but don't live.
Right, so we know the total number of units, 4,000, and then we had roughly 2,000 plus 700, 2,700 short-term rentals. So of the 4,000, 2,700 is short-term rentals. That's where the 45, 55 came from.
Yeah.
So, but that could be skewed, right?
How do you get your dwelling unit number? Where
That
does
was from the
come
census. That was 2020. And then we just factored up based on permits at some percent, 25% that's been built. But so it'll affect it by 1 or 2%. But
Because I think to Nick's point, there's probably more structures out there that weren't counted in the census that
Oh, without a doubt.
that
mm,
aren't on the
Giant-
short-term rental
I-
That's
market.
the biggest.
I
that's the
think that
biggest-
4,000 number is wrong.
Well, keep in mind, those are dwelling units. And so when you talk about a population growth, what do
Well,
you?
we're talking about both.
We're
right?
talking about
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but I'm saying out of those, so out of, if we use an assumption of 3,500 people.
But
for
he's saying,
population.
he's saying dwelling units, is
Right,
that
but-
your 4,000 number.
Right.
I think that number is
That was
closer to
census.
7,000. But how does census count number of buildings, number of dwelling units?
They don't.
I got it from
They
the
don't count
the
people
census
for work.
data.
Household.
Number of
That's
dwelling
people,
units.
That's the number of households.
Dwelling
units is-
No.
They
Dwelling
count.
Well, you would think a
Individual
household is
unit?
in a house. Well, my point is out of our population, which, yeah, I'm just saying 3,500 people, that may only constitute 1,000 units.
Yeah,
1,000 units for that
that's true.
number of people. That's,
Okay, so we're forecasting 3,500 people over the next 10 years?
well, I'm saying,
Just
I tend to
ballparking?
use
He
that number
thinks
a
3,500
lot.
is what we have right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, dwelling units.
And I
Okay,
think
sorry,
that may be
sorry.
pushing it. I think we have a bigger risk of attrition than we do
I look at,
growth.
I look at this number and I don't think in 2032, we're gonna have 5,865 people that live here. I think that 3% growth rate is too high.
What is that date?
This
Oh,
is,
2030.
this is growing your 2021 population by 3. These are just different scenarios of growth, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11%. And based on, sorry, how do I go back here?
It would be interesting to see in 2016 what we said the 2020 population was gonna.
The data's so hard because you had
Oh,
hurricane in there.
Yeah.
And then you had COVID. And then you've had a national building.
Right. And now we got growth happening, but now we got inflation that might offset some of that maybe. So it's kind of, we got two different trends going. So we're kind of crystal balling
I'm with
here.
Nicole, I think the 3 is kind of pushing it.
So you think it's more like the 2,
I think it's pretty low.
2.19?
Mhm.
Unless
I do.
Samsung or Tesla's moving to town. We don't
You
have
never
an-
know.
We don't have an industry and it's expensive to live here, so.
Yeah,
But
you're
that's-
making up for that in the tourism side.
but that's just the permanent residents. But your
Right.
other population growth is gonna grow a lot, and that is still weighs in on the impact.
For sure.
So, I mean, I think it is smart to go with the middle.
Yeah.
Definitely a hybrid here.
So a hybrid somewhere between 2 and 9 or 2 and that 20%.
We don't want this thing too high.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm kind of with you.
I think it's gonna slow.
Okay,
I do.
so 5%?
Which part? Population?
No,
Or
the building it is gonna slow. It is gonna slow a little bit,
I mean, it
a little bit.
never
Well, It's
has.
gonna stop because we're
It's
gonna
gonna
be on
stop.
land.
You'll be full,
Oh,
right?
I mean,
It's
it's
just.
Well,
historically, it's never slowed.
We haven't
Yeah.
even scratched the bay side yet, so fill up the Gulf side, then we start. filling the bay side.
It's not that far. It really is. Take away land.
Why would you take it away?
Well, but you can
It's already
estimate
master plan. That's in motion.
I know,
It's going.
I know, but those aren't on the books yet. I'm saying,
Well, no, they're on his
On
books.
his-
He's spending mega dollars.
they're not on these books. What I'm saying is that we still got a lot of units to go.
There's not
Build
that.
out.
You take that out, we already know that's planned. The rest of that Bayside is just not that much property that's developed.
I don't think we're disagreeing, I'm just saying, but that,
You guys are saying
But it'd be
the same thing.
nice to see what city staff thought, based on what you know, developments going on down the highway. How many units do you think are gonna be built? You know, if there's 1,000 on Bayside, or, you know, whatever the number is. Whatever's been preliminary plats or things that have been done down on the left, on the ocean side. You know, how much more is there dwelling units that are gonna be built or could be built?
More than we've got on the ground right now, or more than are already entitled?
or just that,
Either way.
Either way, yeah.
Whatever you-
It's 9 units an acre, developable acre,
Right.
say with,
Right.
you know, 8 to 9.
Yeah.
But I digress.
No,
I-
it's important.
I'd say you got 5,000 units
5,000
built
more
out
units.
on the Bayside.
Oh,
That's a lot.
5,000
That is a
times
lot.
2.7 persons per dwelling
To the
unit?
city limits, you don't think it's that many?
I don't think it's that many.
So that'd be 10, 12,000 more people?
5,000.
We need a lot of fill.
not people. dwelling units.
Yeah.
Well, 5,000
There's some
times
still,
persons
but-
per dwelling unit.
But really.
Oh, that's just the basic.
The data that I wish we had was, and I really think the day trippers are more than half of our visitors. That's gigantic, and that's a gigantic impact. But most of them don't go and eat, they're going to the beach. They're going to the state
Yeah.
beach effectively.
And that's what
Port
stinks.
Aransas is just in the way of the state's beach.
That's right. And that's what stinks about this whole thing,
I
because,
mean, that's how it's used.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
those people buy at HEB in Houston on their way down, or Corpus, they're going to the beach and they leave. But that's a giant impact that I don't think we've ever addressed as far as what.
and we really can't
There's not
on
a lot
roads
you do that.
Well, I
because,
know as far as a fee,
right,
there's a giant impact.
yeah, no question. No question on the O&M side, no question. And the reason we can't is because it's an open system of improvements. Unless we put some toll gates there on either side,
There's no way to calculate, even if we had that data, there's no way to change this.
No, I
That would be
understand,
different.
It's just.
All right, there's the
when you
beach
have-
parking
when you have a
permit, it's $12
population
to
of
get it.
3,000,
that needs to go up too. Is it 12 bucks
I
for
don't know,
the?
I've already had discussions about that, the beach parking permits can't go up dramatically, so,
That's a different discussion.
yeah, that doesn't.
But because we're talking about that on the comp plan side.
We can't spend the money that we're already generating from beach.
I know, there's,
There's no compelling reason to raise.
Don't listen. Is it recorded?
That's a different discussion. So, okay, let's get back to the growth rate here.
Yeah.
All right. So I threw out 9% because it was somewhere in, you guys think it's too high. I am fine with backing it down. 5%?
I think if people understood what you're trying to accomplish here, where too high of a growth rate, even if it is potentially more realistic, is going to hurt our ability to collect the impact fees at the level that we're
Do
at.
you have a copy of the
Let's
study?
keep it
Do
conservative.
you have a copy
I
of the
don't
study?
have a copy of it with me. It
Rick,
might
you
be
weren't
on
here
the
when we
internet.
talked
Is it
about
on,
that.
is it on our website?
We set it too
Might be on
high.
our
No,
website.
no,
It
we've
goes
already
down.
talked about it.
Yeah,
If it is, it's appendix, if it is, I can see what that percentage that we consumed last go round. Maybe we can have a guesstimate of will we be impacted?
But we also, Eddie and I also had an offline conversation about other potential alternative to straight impact fee to have the development pay for the need for increased capacity. So there's other, possibly other. What did we called it I don't know, I keep wanting to gravitate towards.
Like a user fee?
Yeah.
The user fee, that's on the O&M side. So some cities are actually, College Station, I couldn't believe this. They did an impact fee, that's new capital cost. That same night, they adopted a user fee. That's O&M cost. That's the one that comes on your monthly water bill, $1, $2, $3, that pays for the O&M type stuff. So it's the annualized cost of maintenance, per year, the annualized cost divided by the number of vehicle miles generated from existing development, that we stratified it, and that's how the dollars came out, depending on the type of land use, but that's on the O&M side. And cities are doing it. Fort Worth is getting ready to adopt it if they haven't already
Corpus is
adopted.
doing it, I think with their stormwater.
Yeah.
They have to
That
use
is
roads.
Part of the ordinance itself, I got the ordinance online. I don't think I've got the stuff.
Oh, shucks. Yeah, no, it's appendix G of the report, and bad consultant, I didn't.
I don't know that it is. I've got it somewhere.
I can go grab it.
No, what?
3.5. At some point, it's just a number.
Yeah, that's, what do you think,
There's no more
Chad?
science to this.
I think, I mean, I'm just, compounding can be mean or it can be good, depending on if you're trying to save money or pay debt, but it's, you move it 50 basis points the wrong way and that number gets too high real quick because of the compounding effect of it.
Rick, do you know the password?
I think the actual growth number is closer to 3% of the permanent residents,
Yeah.
assuming we keep on the kind of the trajectory we've been now, and we just don't have an industry.
What's the SSID? What's the-
Yeah, I think it's there or lower.
Number, my hotspot doesn't work very well.
So there's a lean between that and then the amount of actual houses that go on the ground, which 45%, I agree, think is way too high. I think 10% is way too low, just looking at my client base versus yours, I'm probably somewhere between 10 and 20.
You know, I was speaking in my last 20 years now, I'm probably at 10 to 15 permanent residents per person out of town secondary home.
Sure.
I mean, we still, but this, I mean, how far off do you think the census data is though on it? I think it's probably not too
I
terribly
think,
off.
I think they've always been high.
Do you think so?
So it's
Yeah.
admin with a capital
There's
A.
industry people here.
Well, I mean, but they,
There's a lot of dead people and people that have left on that census.
well, you know what, though, and the other thought too, I mean, because we have a lot of residents in RVs and whatnot too, and I'm wondering how much of that got impacted into the census data. There are a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's actually a pretty high percentage.
I just don't, I think
And then you got the rental
the
units.
census is, the flaw in the census data is accentuated in full town.
I agree. Your error,
Their data
your error,
collection is-
yeah, it's way off if you have a problem. That's right.
I think it was 3.
Definitely a lot more accurate when you have a large city.
The last go around, we had 3%.
And I think even then. we talked
I
about
make a
that.
motion for 3. I second your 3. I second your 3.
I know, look at that.
North, how bad it is versus south.
Oh, I know.
I
Okay.
know they've been back and forth, for engineers and everybody, you're trying to keep that program going, but it appears to be working.
I know.
Yes,
I think that's all. it is.
Here.
this is all that's left right here. Sign's right here. But this is all, Jeff. And then half of that's weapons. I mean,
If
it's
they
not
happen
that
way
much.
too low, if
There's
then
not
where
that
we can
much
get all,
on
where
the
you get all the
side.
bill.
So,
Me
okay,
too.
so I got some data here. So of that CIP that we had in 2016, in service area 1, the core of the community, we were consuming 90% of that CIP. That was with a 3% growth rate. So now we got to figure out how much has been consumed by traffic plus growth. We might tap out. But I know we're potentially considering adding some project collector streets into the program, but that's kind of beside the point. Service area 2, we had consumed all that capacity. That's why that cost per service unit was down. So who said 3.5?
Yeah,
You said
it was-
3,
Yeah,
I'm waffling.
it was, yeah, that's Nick.
Somebody said maybe 3.5, and I'm just, we gotta be careful with the compounding factor. 'Cause
Yeah, right. That's what we would consume. So, I mean, it's going to be whatever it's going to be.
Right.
I mean, so, I mean, we don't want to manipulate the calculation based on what we think. Let's just,
3.
Yeah.
We've been running at 1.9. So
in last go around, we went 3%. Maybe that was too high, you know? So, and you're right. We have been, can you go back to the, we're at 1.9% this past year. Over the last 3 years, 1.83. Over the 5 years, 2.19. Yeah, there's that chart. So there's nothing wrong with 3.5%, somewhere in there. And what that would mean is by 2032, we're at 5,800 people, almost 5,900 people.
What year?
2032.
I mean, that's,
That's still low.
I think we-
that's a little aggressive still. on
but
population.
the 3.3 was aggressive back in 2016.
Right.
We're not at the numbers that we said we were gonna be then.
I think we're worn it out.
I'd say anything like 3 and under.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been running 1.83 for the last 3 years.
Steady 3 years,
5 years, 2.19.
2.5. I don't mind changing.
That gives us something to lean on at least. Okay.
So a
This is the
lower
trend.
growth rate
Yeah.
than we used last time?
So more
You
growth
got
rate
five. You got-
increases the,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Value of the impact.
And-
Dollars.
It's on a unit cost basis, so that cost per service unit will be about the same. Service area 2 will still be down because we're consuming all that capacity. It was $900 a service unit. Service area 1 is 1,605.
So what is the growth rate? Changing the growth rate going down, how does that affect it?
Well, we've got roughly 10% of capacity in the existing CIP, so maybe we consume it, maybe we don't. But if we consume it, it just drops that cost per service unit a little bit, and maybe it'll normalize a little bit between the two. I don't know if there's any pining
The
going
most
on
I
between
actually
service
had
area
is
1 and
those
2.
last 5 years, so what was it, 1.8?
2.19.
2.19 in the last 2 years?
That's 3 years, 1.83.
Yeah.
That's 10 is 1.91, 7 is 2.28.
I think it's awfully close to 2%.
And there's really no right or wrong. We're going to be looking at this thing again in 4.5
And
years,
that- and that's
5 years.
good, that's a reach.
Yeah.
So help me on this. So if it's 900 something per service unit factor in there, how does that turn into it?
Well, that's just the cost per service unit times whatever the land use is. So
Okay, so
that's that equivalency table.
single family home, once you go to the table, maybe.
That's correct.
Really
And
One
that
point
will,
whatever,
I mean,
1.48,
2.2 cars per house.
1.84, yeah.
and that will, just because with other communities that we've worked with, we know the trip gen rates are falling. So that will be a factor there. And I mean, it makes sense. Folks are shopping online.
Well, we live in Port A, that's kind of what you have to do.
The requirement.
Still got to get to Juan's. Waterburn. Lilo's.
So this is
Home Depot.
last call.
5 miles a week.
That's the searching generates by different.
Okay, so if I'm looking at a single family home at the 1.48
That's correct.
times the 900, it's coming out to far less than what the actual
You have
roadway.
900,
impact fee is.
14, 1,500.
But it's actually 23.
Because that's at 50% of the.
No, that's the collection rate. That was the 50%.
Right.
Yeah, so what number is 2,300? That's service area 1, I think. Service area 1 is, what did I say, 1,600? So 1,600 times 1.48.
I haven't paid one in like 5 days, but I have to look it up. It's like
$23.75.
$2,375.
That's-
So it's
that's
roadway
in one.
plus.
That's in zone 1.
Is Mark in that,
It is
not in that impact fee?
No,
That's
that was just the
five.
road
That's
piece.
That's separate.
500 something.
Yeah, that's separate.
7.
Yeah, 2,375 is service area 1. Service area 2 would be, does it 900 times 1.48 is 1,332.
Yeah, and that's right. And that's what you're paying for Cinnamon Shore South. It's 13.32.
Got it.
That's actually kind of funny. I've never heard that before. I haven't paid one in 5 days. Now I have a story to share with another community.
It's about speed. So when I'm,
This one here is
Oh, that walks through how we adjusted the data. This is trip lengths and adjustments.
but where is it broken down by service area? So,
Oh, cost per service unit?
yeah. So I was looking at, I think we said I was looking at 1 or 2 here. Here it is.
So
there we go.
1. So the full cost is 3,200. Here's what's the maximum we're collecting, 1,600 service area 1.
But that's an addition. That has nothing to do with it.
But there's probably been some sort of cost of,
3,000.
there's probably been. an
Now
annual adjustment.
we'll update the construction costs, right, with new cost data. We'll also with what's left in the CIP.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's many variables that go into the calculation of the new cost.
We're not done yet.
Oh, no, you're just starting.
First meeting.
Yeah. This technical, this nightmare for y'all is just starting.
Soft sale.
Explaining
Now,
what you're going to be.
If I'm to be brutally honest here, you know, some folks, they just want to get to the bottom line. Don't give me all this technical, other folks want the details. So if you want just the end, just power down until the third meeting, then we'll get to the end. But until then, we'll wrap up, do a little technical work too.
So has there been an annual cost adjustment to this?
No,
Because it shows the adjusted 50% cost at 1605
That was
in
the,
service area 1.
when we implemented the new, because maybe we did go from 1279.
yeah, so I think it was a slow up from the last go
And we
around.
didn't want to do that to you guys overnight, so they increased a little bit for a year, a little bit more for
Little
a
cost of
year,
living adjustment.
and then the full rate.
I mean, I'm not complaining. I think it's a necessary evil to help everything. So
But I think it's.
But back then it wasn't.
The concept was like, you've got 20 projects on the board right now,
Already costed
knowing
out.
that you're about to permit those, it was just a little graduated program to where you knew to start budgeting more.
they had 9.5 million in here in 2016.
So it was a pretty big jump that first year, if we just went to the full new rate.
Was this somebody's personal copy of this thing?
It is mine, but you can borrow it.
I'm gonna run off with it.
We can send it, we can
With
send
all the
it to
spare
you.
hours of my day, I'm going to go.
Your math nervousness is showing up.
Sorry.
That is within your purview. It is. It is.
He just wants to make sure we've been charging him right.
This will make me sleep.
I am not running off with a
She
copy
knows
of
where my
it.
head's at.
He's like, hang on a second.
So,
I'll take it home and read it. Put me to bed.
you know, I've said that before. It's good night reading. So, so we're kind of at that growth rate. So if someone wants to step out there and put a growth rate out there and there's a second, we could have a motion and a vote and a,
That was
The
a
motion is
Chad.
2.25. With the rationale of the last 5 years, if anybody goes, y'all pulled that out of your blank. No, we didn't. For the last 5 years, it was 1.8, 1.8, 2.1, 2.1.
5 year was 2.19.
So,
Yeah.
And we're giving
I
them the
second
benefit of
it.
the doubt.
Pardon?
And we're giving the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Yep, I
So
second that.
So there's
For-
rationale with the number.
For the
Yeah.
record, Nick Lorette has motion for a rate of 2.25. Leslie Sussman seconded the motion.
And we need a second.
Yeah, Leslie.
You got it.
Thank you.
We got it.
All right, Craig Scott,
Yes.
Leslie Smith,
Yes.
Nick Lorette,
Yeah.
Barney Farley,
Yes.
Pat Snyder.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Yeah.
Hey, what word?
We got
so
the one.
that was where we are in the action item. We just did the action item. So our next, we're going to do our technical work now to get the land use assumptions developed. We'll be getting with staff on where, so we said 2.25%. So that means it's going to generate X number of dwelling units. We'll get with Rick and Nicole where that's going to happen. So then we'll have the growth allocated, then that'll help drive the cost. The CIP, we'll update the CIP costing. We'll do that cost for service unit calculation. So we'll start doing all that technical work. Next go around, you'll see the LUA report and the CIPs for roads, parks, and drainage. Okay.
Thank you.
So that's all I have today.
And then tomorrow is the comprehensive.
Tomorrow is the
Plan
Comprehensive
tomorrow.
Advisory Committee. So I think tomorrow on the agenda is talking vision of future land use, transportation, facilities. We think it's going to be 2 hours, six to eight.
Yeah, and then there's a CPAC meeting.
That's the
CPAC.
CPAC meeting.
That's the 6 day tomorrow.
I'm losing my mind.
Yep.
So just 6 o'clock.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Everybody comes to that. We need more input.
So any questions on any of this technical stuff? Any comments on it? I mean, it's a straightforward technical calculation, straightforward. Little involved, but more importantly, it's there that backs to how we drive that cost per service unit. And so we've already kind of gone through how we think we're going to grow. And so I'm totally fine with 2.25%.
I've got 2 hours of cheerleading tonight, so I'll give you time.
Yes, sir. Understood.
No,
So
no, I got some time.
I am.
Really?
Oh.
You have the, you have pom-poms and everything?
I've got 3 girls and me and a couple. Wait.
We could really get down into impact fee theory, but the other members may not be ready for that. So we might, it's within your purview to adjourn this meeting. And that's all I have, but I'm here to answer questions if you have questions.
Do we actually need a motion to adjourn or do we just call it?
I used to gamble, let's smoke it.
Fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Call to adjourn the City of Port Aransas Capital Improvement Advisory Committee number 1 on May the 17th, 2022 at 4:51 PM.
All right.
Thank you much. We'll see you in September.
Join us.
And tomorrow.
And
And tomorrow, if you're on that
And
committee, and
tomorrow.
tomorrow, yes.
Was the city council meeting moved
Yes.
this week? So it's next week, right?
24.
24. Put that down.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Oh, it's Tuesday.
It is Tuesday.
Okay.
Is that when they swear in the new?
Yes.
Adams.
They swear in the new
Yeah,
ones?
yeah, right. It would be this one, right?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Who's the run-up?
You
They'll
know,
set
so
that at that meeting.
They said it at that meeting.
no one's asked about
So,
early voting.
yeah, that's